Hello everyone, we're going to look at a heart dissection. So this is a pig's heart, but it's a very similar size and structure to a human heart. So we have the atria at the top here, right? There's one and there's the other one. Right? This is the right atrium. So this blood vessel here, leading into the right atrium, which I can just put my finger in there, that is the vena cava. And then if we move around to the left atrium, here, we will be able to find the pulmonary vein. It is in there somewhere. There it is. There's the pulmonary vein. I can put my finger in the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. Okay? Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down the vena cava into the right atrium and then down into the right ventricle. Right, so here we go. I've cut down into the right atrium and you can see it's all opened out there. And if I hold the heart up, you will be able to look down into the right ventricle. I'm now going to cut down into the right ventricle. There we go. Okay, let's just get rid of some of these blood clots. Okay, right. So in between the right atrium and the right ventricle, we have the AV valve or atrioventricular valve. And the valves are a really thin flap of skin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the scissors to hold up a valve. There. So you can see it is a very thin flap of skin. Right. Now it's attached to the heart muscle by these little cords. We refer to these as the chordae tendineae, or sometimes they're referred to as heartstrings. You might have heard the phrase tugging at your heartstrings. And these stop the valves from turning inside out. Right, I'm now going to go over to the left side of the heart and do exactly the same as I did before. So I am going to cut down the pulmonary vein and I'm going to go into the left ventricle. Sorry, the left atrium, not the left ventricle. There we go. So we're going into the left atrium. There we go. And again, I'll hold it up so you can see, and you can see down into the left ventricle there. And again, I'm going to cut down into the ventricle. And if I move away the blood clot, you can see inside the left ventricle. And actually the valve is much clearer this time because there's less blood clots in here. So there is one of the bits of the valve in the left ventricle. And again, you can see the heartstrings. Now, if we do a wee comparison of the muscular thickness of the left ventricle compared to the right ventricle, we will see quite a big difference. So here is the left ventricle. Notice it is very thick, and the right ventricle is here, is much less thick. Okay, let's see if we can get them both on the camera at the same time. There we go. So left ventricle, right ventricle. Okay, now the left ventricle has got to generate enough pressure, enough force to send blood all the way around the body. That's all the way down to the toes and all the way up to the head. The right ventricle has only got to send blood to the lungs. Okay, so that's why the left ventricle is much thicker, because it has to generate more force, more pressure to get the blood all the way around the body. Okay. Right, I'm now going to have a look at some of the blood vessels associated with the heart. So, leading out of the right ventricle is the pulmonary artery. So I'm just going to cut up the right ventricle and into the pulmonary artery, and hopefully we will be able to see the semilunar valves. There we go. Okay, so if I open this out, and I'll hold it up to the camera, we can see the semilunar valves are here. I've just got my finger under one. And you can kind of see why they're called semilunar valves, because they look like little half moons. If I turn it up the other way, we might get a better view. There we go. I'll hold it out with the scissors. There. There's a semilunar valve. Okay. And I'm going to do the same on the left side of the heart. I am going to cut up and out through the aorta. Now the aorta is this main blood vessel here that I've got my finger in at the moment. It is the main artery for the heart. It is where blood will be at its highest pressure, leaving the heart. So again, I'm going to cut through, and we should see the semilunar valves in the aorta as well. Okay, in fact, again, the left side, we seem to be able to see things a bit more clearly. There we go, right, semilunar valves, there, and there. Right. We can also see in the aorta that very quickly there are other blood vessels, other arteries that branch off it. So this very first branch of the aorta here is the coronary artery. And the coronary artery spreads out. You can see there's my finger in it there. You can see it spreads out over the surface of the heart. And as it does so, right, you can see the blood vessels running down. So the coronary artery's job is to supply the heart muscle with blood, and therefore glucose and oxygen that it needs to give it the energy to contract. Right, final thing I'm going to do is just to show you the difference in thickness between an artery and a vein. So I'm going to chop off this bit of aorta here, like that. So there's a piece of aorta, and let's see, it's quite hard to find a bit of vena cava now that I've completely cut open the atrium. That's the bit I cut into. Right, here we go. There's not a very big bit of vein left, because that was what I cut into to get into the atrium. Right, this will have to do. Right, so here is a bit of vein. You can see that it's very thin. The wall of the vein is very thin, and it's not particularly stretchy. Here is a piece of artery, and you can see that the wall of the artery is much thicker than the vein, and it's also quite stretchy. There you go. Okay, it's quite hard to stretch because my hands are quite slippery. There you go. So the artery is quite slippery. It's quite slippery, quite stretchy even. Okay, so there we go. That's the structure of a heart.